right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Scentiva, available in Clorox Scentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Our esteemed co-host Jesse Garcia is traveling today. With me in the studio is Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and political analyst. Great lawyer, my good friend. So let's begin with something that's troubling me enormously. And the good news is I'm talking to the right person who's written about this very well and understands the issue. And that is, Israel was attacked on October 7th. It was a victim of aggression, terrorism, brutality, rape, murder, torture. And then Israel responded, as any independent nation would, to that act of war against it. And they were attacked by a group called Hamas, funded by, orchestrated by, given weapons by Iran. And how did they respond? They went into Gaza, where the attack came from, and went after Hamas. And they've moved very successfully over the months to move Hamas operatives off the map. And why is that important? It's important to get these operatives off the map to destroy Hamas, because otherwise Hamas has made very, very clear that their goal is to keep coming back and back and back until Israel is obliterated and all the Jews are exterminated. So the Jewish state of Israel has decided that it does not want to be a willing victim to its own destruction, and they're going to fight back. And now, as they're moving step by step by step to eradicate these terrorists who plant their munitions and stand behind hostages in hospitals, in schools, in community centers, use their own living comrades, other Palestinians, as cannon fodder and as human shields. So they finally make it as far as Rafah, and all of a sudden, the President of the United States decides that the political realities, because of the Muslim communities in Michigan and Minnesota, are such that he has to placate them, and he tells an independent state to slow down and not invade, go into Rafah, which is part of Gaza. If you don't do that, then the Hamas group wins in their fight for terrorism. Well, the Democratic Party had shown its ugly face by doing everything they can to undermine Israel and undermine the duly elected Prime Minister, Netanyahu. And Netanyahu is part of a government that's a war cabinet. So you have all the major parties are involved. So it's a war cabinet. It's a unity cabinet. It's not just a narrow, sectarian little party. It is a unified party that supports the government, and the people of Israel overwhelmingly support Netanyahu and the campaign to protect against future invasions and destruction and terrorism by going after Hamas. Hamas could easily have resolved this situation by, number one, not attacking October 7th and just taking care of their own people in Gaza. But certainly after they started the war, they grabbed all these hostages. They could have returned the hostages and then negotiated from there, but they haven't. And so Israel continues the war. So the Democratic Party does what? It keeps telling Israel, stop, 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 let's have a ceasefire, everything will be swell. Swell with whom? And you'll have a two-state solution. Who are you going to have a two-state solution with? And then you expect the leader of the Senate of the United States, Chuck Schumer, himself a Jewish American, who portrays himself as being the protector of Israel. What does he do? He goes out and he declares that there should be an election right now to get rid of Netanyahu, because you can't have peace as long as Netanyahu is the leader of Israel, undermining Israel and Netanyahu at that moment of peril and existential threat. So that brings me up to date, except for one more factor. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, has invited Netanyahu to come to Congress to give an address, a joint address to both the House and the Senate. Schumer's initial reaction was to say no, he wasn't going along with that. But as of a few hours ago, he's reconsidering it, and he may go along with it. And that's the stage that I want to set for our audience and for my good friend Eric Levine, who will not comment on what I just said.
So I agree 100% with everything you say. I think that the joke that's going around in Israel that Joe Biden does indeed have a two-state solution, and the two states are Michigan and Minnesota, as you point out, because of the significant Arab Muslim population in those two states that he needs to win the election. When the war first started, President Biden got it right, rhetorically, emotionally, and geopolitically. But I was writing at the very beginning that we'll see how long this lasts, because it's not going to be over in a day. It's going to take time. And as time goes on, we're going to get deeper and deeper into the election cycle. And as we get deeper into it, I predicted that the space between the United States and Israel would start to widen. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happening. Now, keep in mind, there's a long history of, when it relates to Jews, of when Jews die. And it goes back even before the Holocaust, but of course the Holocaust is the prime example. Everybody weeps, everybody sobs, everybody wrings their hands, everyone's upset. Oh, the poor dead Jews. It's awful. Look how many Jews are dead. But when the Jews stand up and defend themselves, that's the bridge too far. And in essence, Israel, the Zionist experiment, is all about Jews defending themselves, Jews being in charge of their own destiny. And that is what has the left apoplectic. Because it's okay if Jews die, we'll feel sorry for them, but it is not okay for Jews to defend themselves. And that's what we see on college campuses and cities across the country. It is revulsion at the idea that Jews are standing up and defending themselves, and Israel is the avatar, is the central figure in the strong Jew. And that's what these people can't tolerate. And these are the people that Joe Biden needs to be elected president. Now, please do not misconstrue what I am saying. Joe Biden is not an anti-Semite. I believe that Joe Biden is a philo-Semite. I genuinely believe that he's a supporter of the Jewish people, and in his bones, it is a supporter of Israel. But that takes a back seat to his political goals of being reelected. He is a pro-Israel president that needs the vote of anti-Semites and people that seek the destruction of Israel. So he needs to be walking a tight line. So as he puts more and more distance between himself and Israel to appease the Jew haters of the progressive left, a funny thing happens. American Jewish voters are upset, and they are being stripped away from him and are looking to perhaps vote for someone else, perhaps for Donald Trump, whose record on Israel when he was president was actually quite excellent. Remember, he's the one who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's the one who recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. He's the one who helped negotiate the Abraham Accords. He's the one who refused to say that Israeli settlements were illegal in Judea and Samaria. So Jews, in many respects, think to themselves, maybe we have an alternative. Maybe we should be looking to Donald Trump, as ironic as that may sound. So what is a president who's floundering around, who's unpopular, who has a failed foreign policy, and is offending Jewish voters to do? Cue the big Jew. Here comes Chuck Schumer, a man with no core, with no principles, with no moral compass, who only cares about being the leader, the majority leader of the Senate. That's all he cares about. He wants Joe Biden to be reelected, and he wants to be the majority leader of the Senate. And if he has to sell out American Jews, and if he has to sell out Americans who support Israel, and if he has to sell out Israel to do it, so be it. This notion that Chuck Schumer would go around and tell everyone Shomer, Shomer is the Hebrew word for guardian, that he's the Shomer of Israel, we now know, of course, is a lie. It's a lie. Israel has always been a prop for him. is that he could use to get votes, because when he was in Brooklyn, it was important to get Jewish votes. So he needed to be pro-Israel. Now, when it's necessary to get the votes of the anti-Semites, he's prepared to turn on Israel. That's okay for him. And we've seen this perfidy before. Let's go back to the Iran nuclear deal. Chuck Schumer, when he was in the Senate, when Barack Obama was president, he sat on his hands and waited to make sure that President Obama had enough votes in the Senate to be able to not oppose the nuclear deal. Remember, they turned it on its head. It was a treaty. When it's a treaty, you need 2/3 of the vote of the Senate. Schumer worked with Obama to have it reversed so that you needed 2/3 of the vote of the Senate to oppose it. But so he waited until Obama had enough votes so that it wouldn't be opposed in the Senate, then tepidly came out against it. He had the opportunity at the time to oppose it publicly while it was up in the air whether or not it could pass. He sat on his hands and did nothing. And then, when he became majority leader, the anti-Semitic left in his party, predominantly by AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, the Squad, the Progressive Caucus in the House, people who wish Israel ill, became more and more ascendant, more and more powerful. College campuses became more and more anti-Semitic, and Chuck Schumer sat on his hands and said nothing. Even after the attacks on October 7th, Chuck Schumer said and did nothing. It was only after the uproar following the testimony by the three college presidents, the ones from Harvard, Penn, and MIT, where they could not bring themselves to say it was against school policy to advocate for the eradication of the Jewish people, that the uproar began. The pressure became too much for Chuck, because many of the children of his constituents and donors went to Penn, went to Harvard, went to MIT. At that point, then, he finally took to the floor of the Senate and made a speech about the growing anti-Semitism. The question there is, Chuck, where the hell have you been? You've seen it going on. So he gave that one speech, and then he disappeared. We've heard nothing from him again since on the issue of anti-Semitism and the rising anti-Israeli sentiment in the Democratic Party, until he decides to stand up and protect and defend Joe Biden's appeasement of the radical left in his party, which we all know is racist and anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. So Schumer has a lot to answer for, but he will not. He will continue on down this road. He has chosen instead to call Donald Trump an anti-Semite, because Donald Trump did indeed make some very unfortunate statements about Jews who vote Democratic, that somehow they hate the religion and somehow they hate Israel.
That's Trump's foolishness. But the fact,
right? It's
Trump's foolish, because he has a very distant relationship to, as Thomas Jefferson would have said, felicity of expression. He does not speak as clearly. Well, that's too glib. That's just giving Trump too much of a pass. He does it too many times. It was a really stupid, offensive thing to say, but it was not anti-Semitic. I agree with that. There's a joke going around in Jewish circles. What's the difference between a Reform rabbi and Donald Trump? The answer is that Donald Trump's grandchildren are Jewish. Remember, Ivanka, the apple of his eye, converted to Judaism, married Jared Kushner, an Orthodox Jew, and they are raising their children as proud American Orthodox Jews. Those are Donald Trump's grandchildren, who he loves and adores. So according to Chuck Schumer's formulation, Joe Biden is the pro-Israel, is the pro-Jew president that needs the votes of anti-Semites to win, and Donald Trump somehow is the anti-Semite who needs the pro-Israel, pro-Jewish vote to win. It doesn't make any sense. While his characterization of Biden is correct, the characterization of Trump is just simply off base. Look, the core of this is that Chuck Schumer has no core. Well, that's very well said. But in defense of my comment about Donald Trump not having the felicity of expression attributed to Thomas Jefferson, I will say to you, look at the record. The guy has a distant relationship with the real control over language. He also has problems with impulse control. I grant you that. But I will tell you, on the issue of the protection of the state of Israel, the issue of anti-Semitism, the issue of that we will get to in other matters as we talk this hour. You can count on Trump to do the right thing, or you can count on the Schumers and the Bidens of the world is to sell out Israel and America. And it's not just Israel, by the way. Just let's be clear. Israel is just the first line of defense for Western civilization against extreme Islamist forces. A war of civilization against Western civilization. So whether you like Jews, you don't like Jews, you don't like Israel, you do like Israel, understand, first they're going after the Israelis, then they'll take apart any kind of stability of moderate Arabs in the Middle East, and they're all over breaking down the barriers of civilization in Europe as we speak, and their goal is to do the same thing here in the United States. So please, when you're thinking about who you can count on, understand who's done what. The Schumers and the Bidens are selling us out, and Biden is responsible for that because he wants to be reelected, and Schumer's responsible for that because he wants to be majority leader of the Senate again, and they have no moral core. As my good friend Eric Levine has said, this is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and lawyer. We'll be back in a moment with more interesting conversation on Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Are we still on the trail? Is this pack getting heavier? More switchbacks? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves
Just a little further. You got this.
that we find only outside.
Wow. Look at the stars. This is incredible.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
Home means something different to everyone. But with Rocket Mortgage, home can mean even more. It can mean a college education, taming your high-interest debt, even a renovation. We've made it easier than ever to use your home equity. That home you worked so hard for, now it can work hard for you. Call 800-4ROCKET or visit rocket.com to find out more.
Rocket Mortgage, LLC, licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org, number 3030.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Eric Levine, noted essayist, political commentator, and attorney. My co-host, Jesse Garcia, is traveling today, and we're very fortunate indeed to have Eric in the studio. So, Eric, we've just covered Biden and Schumer selling out Israel. And in fact, as I point out in my last comments at the end of our first segment, I think by selling out Israel, they're selling out the United States of America national security interests.
I agree with that.
Okay. So I want to talk about national security issues from a different perspective now. And that is, I want to talk about the TikTok problem. And the TikTok problem is really one illustration of many about the fact that we are in a war with China, whether we'll admit it or not. They are at war with us, and they've done everything possible to make our lives difficult and to undermine America. Now, why do I talk about TikTok? TikTok is owned by the Chinese Communist Party or their fronts. What they do is they use it as a spy vehicle. They get all kinds of information from our young people off their phones and their computers. More importantly, they're in a campaign to brainwash the young, and also a campaign to try to set the narrative for important issues in the United States to divide the American people. Their game, the Chinese game, is without firing a shot to prevail. How do you do that? You make America so weak that you don't need an army to march in because it's totally undermined. How do you do that, for example? Well, you do it one way by making sure that all the ingredients for fentanyl come out of China, go to the Mexican cartels, they mix it up, move it into America, so we can lose 100,000 people a year through fentanyl poison. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to create social division on certain issues, whether it's the Israeli situation or the Ukrainian situation. Whatever the issue is, abortion rights, whatever the issue is, you can be sure that the Chinese communist operatives are spinning a narrative that will increase divisiveness in this country, undermine the strength of this country in difficult times. What else have they done? Well, how about the fact they fund all these universities and have all these centers, which are both spy places as well as indoctrination places, and they're buying off academics and the institutions because they're throwing money at them and it's easily bought off. Institution after institution after institution is bought off with their so-called centers for Islamic studies funded by the Chinese or Asian studies followed by the Chinese. It's impossible to underestimate their ability and their cunning. We haven't even learned to set up a checkerboard, and these guys are playing advanced chess with us. What else are they doing? They're buying up U.S. properties, farmland, agricultural land. Our food supply is at risk. And a lot of the properties they're buying up are near our military bases. Another way to, spy on us. What else are they doing? They're giving campaign contributions to our elected officials. You have that idiot from California, a congressman, who's having an affair with a Chinese spy, and they had him, Nancy Pelosi, had him on foreign affairs and intelligence committees. I mean,
Eric Swalwell.
Yeah, what a ridiculous thing that is. And the Democrats have no shame. They let that individual who has showed no loyalty and no judgment to the United States of America sit on important committees. And to his credit, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, removed him from important committees where he's a threat to national security. Eric Swalwell is a threat to national security. He was totally controlled by the Communist Party through their political campaign contributions and all kinds of other social influencers. So they're buying up and corrupting our elites, our political leaders, our business people. The whole electric car movement is another outrageous phenomenon. People do not want electric cars in this country. Everybody who gets involved with electric cars is losing money. Maybe you have 7% of the population has bought electric cars. People don't want it. So what does Biden and his administration, his EPA do? They make more strict standards with respect to electric cars. How so? Let me rephrase that. More strict standards with respect to fossil fuel gas cars, which makes it impossible to manufacture those because they keep limiting the numbers you can have. So they manufacture them, but it has to be fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. So it makes it impossible to supply the market needs. So you have no choice but to get an electric car. And who controls the battery production? And who controls all the minerals and natural resources to make this? And who uses slave labor to make all this? It's the Chinese. When are we going to wake up and understand that there's an undeclared war against the United States of America and Western civilization by the Chinese Communist Party? Your turn, Eric.
Well, I agree with everything you say.
That's two in a row.
Two in a row. But once again, you just don't go quite far enough.
Okay, that's why I bring you in to take me to the next step.
The next step. Well, let's start from the your perspective. That America is weak. We are, but much of it is of our own making. Take our military. The Navy is understaffed. We don't have enough. We don't have enough ships. We don't have enough submarines. We don't have enough aircraft carriers. The Air Force is not being properly funded. We don't have enough next generation fighter jets. And in no prong of the military are we meeting recruitment standards or recruitment goals. We just don't have enough weaponry, and we don't have enough man and woman power to to defend and protect the United States of America. And why is that? Well, in large part now, and this will feed into the TikTok piece, in large part now, our young people who are graduating high school go to schools where they are taught to hate America. That's what the social justice movement, diversity, equity, inclusion, intersectionality is all about. It's about hating America. America is a systemically racist country. It's based on white privilege. It's based on racism. So who in their right mind would want to risk their lives to defend a country that is systemically racist and evil? So we're teaching our young people hate America. Our elected officials in Washington are cutting back funding for the military. Starting with Obama, we are actually defunding our military. And then we wonder why we're not prepared. So America is weak because America is making itself weak. When countries like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea prey on us, they are emboldened to continue to prey on us because we are making ourselves weaker and weaker and weaker. And TikTok is a prime example. The logarithms that are, when someone uses TikTok, are drafted by the Chinese Communist Party. But a lot of the content that goes up on TikTok is drafted in Iran. Much of the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic rhetoric that people see on TikTok comes out of Iran. So when we see our young people, it's no wonder that the demographic of between 18 and 24-year-olds is the one demographic in the United States that a majority side with Hamas against Israel, because that's the group that uses TikTok most. Now, a bipartisan group of Congress in Congress, in the House of Representatives, thank goodness, have gotten together in overwhelming numbers to demand that TikTok be sold. They're not banning TikTok, so let's disband with let's take care of that that misinformation, disinformation. They're not looking to disband it or bar it. They're looking to force a sale so that the Chinese Communist Party does not own it. And it goes beyond the Chinese Communist Party and the axis of evil, including Russia and China, giving disinformation and bad information to the American people, primarily our youth. I've just lost my train of thought for a second. So Let the
record reflect that I did nothing to do.
You did not. You did not.
Nothing.
Right. It goes beyond just giving disinformation. They also gather personal information about all kinds of people. Users of TikTok, if they go on it, are at risk of having all their personal information downloaded and in a huge database sitting somewhere in China. You make the point about they are at war with us. There is indeed a war going on. There is indeed a war of civilizations going on. You have the axis of evil. You have the tyranny of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea against the American-led world order. And you have shooting wars in those going on right now, two fronts, one in Israel, one in Ukraine. There probably will soon be one in Taiwan, particularly if we don't beef up our military and persuade China that it's too big a price to pay to invade Taiwan. So for now, that's probably their thought process. So they're trying to take it over politically, much like they did Hong Kong. But there never seems to be a realization that even though people are at war with us in their minds, there never seems to be a realization here that we're at war with them. We just kind of sit back and take it. Or are under the impression, if we can just talk to these people, if we can just compete with these people, they're not really our enemies. They're just our competitors. No, damn it. They are our enemies. China is an enemy. Iran is an enemy. Russia is an enemy. I mean, Iran in particular. Iran is responsible for 1/3 of the dead and wounded of Americans in Iraq, and Afghanistan. They blew up the Khobar Tower. They blew up the Marine barracks. They've been at war with us since the inception of the Iranian regime in 1979 when the Ayatollahs took over. China's at war with us. She wants China to be the predominant single superpower in the world. Russia is at war with us. How many cyber attacks must Russia launch against the United States before we realize that they're at war with us? I mean, remember Joe Biden's brilliant response? It's okay if you have cyber attacks against this sector of the economy, just don't attack that sector economy. How about If you touch any sector of our economy, you're going to have a cyber attack that's just going to turn all your lights off. No one's afraid of us anymore. There's no deterrence anymore. There's no fear of American deterrence. So our enemies become more and more emboldened. And TikTok is just one step, one means of this axis of evil that is at war with us, that we are not fighting back against. As I said, there seems to be a consensus now in Congress that TikTok, it's not a good thing that the Chinese Communist Party runs it, owns it, operates it, because anything that has a connection to China, the Chinese Communist Party controls, we have to take it out of their hands, and that should be supported by Americans across the board.
Well, let me tell you another interesting phenomenon coming out of TikTok. And I forget where this gentleman, I say that with quotation marks around it, this gentleman who's an illegal immigrant here in the United States is using TikTok to tell people how to get all kinds of social benefits, gives them a checklist. This is what you have to do to get social benefits, you illegal immigrants, migrants who have no right to be here in the first place. Then he tells them how you go into a house and take it over, somebody else's house. Gives you a step-by-step guide how to go in to an American home when the people are not there. And then under some of the foolish laws we have, a woman was just arrested for trying to throw out somebody who's a squatter in her home that she inherited from her parents. And the illegal migrant called the police, and the police arrested her. Let's say that again. An illegal migrant goes into an American's home, which she owns, she has a deed to, she inherited from her parents. He squats there illegally, a trespasser, a violator of her personal property, her real estate. And who gets arrested? The woman gets arrested because he says she's harassing him. Have you ever heard anything more ridiculous? And it's connected to TikTok because TikTok gave them the guide how to do that, which is the linkage between TikTok undermining us internally over and over again. And before we have to take a break, let's not forget Biden trying to cover up the fact of the illegal flights over U.S. airspace near the military bases. Eric, what's your thought on that before we take the break?
The military bases?
Yeah. I mean, if it hadn't been revealed by a citizen, the Biden administration would have covered it up.
Well, look, when you have balloons flying over the country from California, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, particularly when we knew when it was over the Aleutian Islands that it was approaching the United States, and we do nothing about it. And as you point out, only because some guy looked up in the air and said, "What the hell is that?" That the Biden administration was forced to admit that it existed. But then they still allowed it to traverse the rest of the country. Apparently the winds that were blowing it just blew them over every military base between California.
Must have been a coincidence.
It was just a coincidence. Look, Joe Biden's foreign policy is an abject failure, and it's primarily an abject failure because he's weak. And this weakness is just inviting this aggression.
All right. We have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with esteemed commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. We'll be back in a few moments. Please stay tuned.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Missing out on family time because of all the noise? Enjoy the moment without straining to keep up with the conversation.
Wow, what a beautiful sunset.
Discover Nuance Audio, the new invisible hearing solution that's built into your glasses. Discreet, comfortable, and easy to use. Nuance Audio glasses help you hear better and reduce background noise, so you can get back to enjoying time with your loved ones. Find a store near you at nuanceaudio.com.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. My good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and County Chair of Suffolk Party, is traveling today. With me in the studio here at WABC is Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. So, Eric, let's talk about why it's so important that the Democratic Party not control all the branches of government. And I mean the presidency, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and of course, if they control the presidency and the Senate, they'll soon control the federal judiciary as well. Why is it so important? Well, I respectfully submit the answer is obvious. Go back to the Federalist Papers. Go back to the debates of the Constitutional Convention that gave us our great Constitution. The whole theory is that you don't want to have tyranny of the majority. You want to have a system of checks and balances. You don't want one faction controlling everything. Because when one faction controls everything, you have majority tyranny and minority rights are extinguished. All under the color of legitimacy, because you say, well, we control the apparatus of government, so it's got to be swell, it's got to be okay. But the point is, when governments do stupid policies, they need to be checked. When they try to cover up corruption, they need to be exposed. You'd never know about the Biden corruption and that family corruption operation, but for the fact the United States House of Representatives is in the hands of the Republicans. They lied from the very, very beginning about Trump and Russian collusion. They lied about the laptop of Hunter Biden, which was his laptop. They later admitted it was a true and authentic instrument. They lie every possible time about the business deals. Will you please tell me why it is that somebody who's a drug addict, a prostitute chaser, who has no skill set, who has no expertise, is getting tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, and why that money is being funneled to the uncle, Jim, and why Joe Biden's expenses are picked up by Hunter, and why is it that Jim Biden gets a check from the Chinese Communist Party, some business shelter, which is really controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, some business enterprise, which is just a phantom organization. They send money to Jim, and Jim then cuts a check, and it gets $40,000, for example, and gives it to Joe Biden. And then they say it's repayment of a loan. And they said money is fungible. Well, that's nice. I'll stipulate consent and agree money is fungible, except all Jim Biden had in his account when he got this money was a little over $100, somewhere between $100 and $200. The money came from the Chinese company to Jim, to Joe. And the laws are very, very clear in terms of corruption. You don't have to have a direct payment as long as somebody that you're affiliated with, connected with, is getting a benefit because of your action or non-action. So that's one example of why you need that. Another example, and I go back to the judiciary. Do you really want to have a judiciary that rubber stamps all the extreme progressive legislation, whether it's a so-called Green New Deal or giving away free money to college students when everybody else has to pay the freight for them? Free money, forgive loans, unconstitutional. You want to have a court or a series of federal judges who ratify that and say it's perfectly fine. It's not unconstitutional. You want to have that. You want to have a Senate that doesn't do the right thing when you cut a deal like Eric was talking about earlier in the show, when you have a deal that should have been a treaty, the Iran deal should have been a treaty, but it was controlled by the Democrats, and they said it wasn't a treaty, it was just an agreement, whatever that means. And the Senate went into the tank. So time after time after time, you have to see the genius of our founding fathers, the genius of our constitutional system of checks and balances. You do not want to have the Democrats controlling everything. You have to have a balance. You have to have somebody holding them to account. Somebody has to thwart their aggression against democracy. They're the ones who say all the time, Trump is a threat to democracy. The true threat to democracy is that party tells me I can't buy any car but an electric car, even if I want a gas-powered car. It's telling me I can't have a gas-powered stove. It's telling me I have to use something different with my refrigerator or my lawnmower. That's the true threat to democracy. Eric, your turn.
So the one thing that tyrannies have had in common since the beginning of time, whether they're an authoritarian regime or a totalitarian regime, is that those governments are run by either a single party or a single individual. There's no exception to that rule. What has distinguished the United States and the Western democracies from these tyrannies is a system of checks and balances, or democratically elected officials where people have a choice. It's all about choice. And the danger of the Democrats being in control of the White House, the Senate, and the House is that they will take away that choice and we will turn into a single party country. Because what the Democrats will one of the first things they will do, particularly if Chuck Schumer, who we've established has no core or no moral compass, it's all about power. It's power over love of country, is to do away with the filibuster in the Senate. The filibuster, of course, means that there has to be 60 votes to bring cloture. Cloture means now you can bring the vote, a bill or something to the floor for a vote, in which case then it's just the majority. But you need 60 votes to bring cloture. And if you do away with the filibuster and it's just 50, just the majority, then you won't be able to block packing the court. You won't be able to block D.C. from becoming a state. You won't be able to block federal election laws applying for all 50 states. So what will happen is if the Democrats win all three and they do away with the filibuster, and if D.C. becomes a state, it will make it virtually impossible for the Republicans to ever control the Senate again. If they are successful in passing what Nancy Pelosi called H.R. 1 in her last go-around as Speaker, you would federalize all election laws. Those laws were drafted in such a way as to make sure Republicans will never win again. And they, of course, will then pack the court. They will just vote to put as many Supreme Court justices as necessary on the court until such time as the current conservative court is watered down to be a liberal or progressive court, and which will be just a automatic vote for everything the Democrats will want to do in the House and the Senate and the White House. And then the distinction between the United States and Russia and China and Iran will begin to blur, because then that will be the beginning, unfortunately, of the United States becoming a single party state, a totalitarian type of regime. You think I'm making something up? You think I'm just being too extreme? Go back to the 20th century. Look at Weimar Germany. Look at the Soviet Union. How did these places how did these regimes come into place? How did they come to power? Crazy things have happened throughout history. But there must be a system of checks and balances. There must always be an opportunity for the Republicans to win, and there must always be an opportunity for Democrats to win, because that's when the voters and the American citizen has a chance to have their voices heard. If it's just one party, nobody cares what the citizens say. No one cares what the voters say, because they know they're going to win. It's irrelevant. And that is really a very dangerous thing. And that is why it is so critical, at a minimum, that the Republicans retake the Senate in November, because that's the firewall. That may well be the one thing that stands between the United States that we know and love and the United States we don't recognize.
I just want to add one one thing to that, Eric. You know, if there's a case that goes to the United States House of Representatives as a tiebreaker for who the president is, that's a vote of the United States House of Representatives. And one of the consequences of a flood of illegal migrants, because the census includes illegal migrants. Very few people know that. They don't do the census just based on U.S. citizens. They count in illegal migrants. So fundamentally, they're packing the jurisdictions of various communities with illegal migrants will then change how many House seats you have. So you can pack it in such a way that you can be ensured if a case ever goes controversy in terms of who should be president and a vote by the House of Representatives, it will be packed because the numbers of House seats will go into Democratic hands, being packed by a new illegal population. Let's not forget that. I want to shift gears. I want to raise this issue with you, Eric. What we've seen here under the leadership of Biden and his Attorney General, Garland, and Democratic prosecutors across the country, whether it's Bragg in Manhattan DA's office, or Tish James, the New York State Attorney General, or Fani Willis in Georgia, or Jack Smith, the special counsel going after Trump in those cases. You have a corruption by the Democratic Party of the political system. They're using the judicial system to corrupt the political system. This is election interference. These are not free and open elections. They are trying to taint Donald Trump so he gets convicted of something or is destroyed economically somehow so that he cannot compete as a meaningful candidate to ensure the reelection of Joe Biden. That's what's going on here, Eric. Corruption of our judicial system for political goal. Now, it's not about Trump, ladies and gentlemen. If it was just about Trump, people say, well, I can't stand Trump. He's an evil guy. He's another Hitler and all that nonsense. No. You go after Trump, you can go after anybody. When the corruption of the judicial system happens, Trump may be the first one up, but it's anybody. Anybody who opposes the will of this extreme left tyranny, this anti-democratic tyranny of the democratic left that will go after using the judicial system. Just the way the Nazis, using the judicial system, went after people who did not support the Nazi regime and criticized it.
Well,
that's what they would do.
That was Joseph Stalin's primary weapon to go after his opponents, his political opponents.
And this is serious business. I want to talk about the most recent one that's standing out to my attention and just outrages me. And that's the Tish James, the Attorney General of New York's case against Trump. Let's be very clear. They claim it's some sort of fraud under the executive law. First of all, the law itself is unconstitutional, in my opinion. Why? Because there was no injury to any party. All the parties were made whole. All the banks who loaned the money got paid and paid well and said they'd do business with, again, there was merely bookkeeping about how Trump did his checking account. That's all we're talking about. So then you go before Justice Arthur Engoron, a judge I know from my days in Manhattan in the Supreme Court. So I know Arthur Engoron. And what does he do? He decides right off the bat that Trump is guilty. It's only a question of how much he's going to pay, even though there's no damages to anybody. And then he hits him with this enormous verdict.
No damages. They got everything they bargained for. They got 100%.
Right. That's the point.
They got
there's
100
no injury,
cents
no
on every dollar.
damage. It's the most ridiculous thing. So Engoron then hits Trump with fines in excess of $450 million. And because of the quirks of the New York judicial system, Trump has to get the money up to post the bond so he can appeal, even though Engoron's decision was wrong because the law should have been thrown out. The executive law should be thrown out as unconstitutional. The damage award was excessive. That should be thrown as unconstitutional. They're denying him a right of appeal, which is denial of equal protection, excessive bail, and due process. And he has to pony up the money or he loses. And what does Tish James do every day? She says, oh, it's another $180,000 interest today. Isn't that great? And she brags about it. What else does Tish James do? She says, I can't wait to take over Trump Tower. This is a woman who ran for Attorney General of the state of New York saying she was going to get Trump. And Alan Dershowitz, who is a guest with us every week on Katz and Cosby, has said in his book, Katz Katson Crosby, he said this on our show many times. Why did I write the book? Because he was so outraged. He's a liberal Democrat. So outraged, he wrote a book called Get Trump, The Prostitution, Destruction of the Judicial System. Your thoughts, Eric?
Well, I agree with that 100%. The only difference we might have is I happen to think the Jack Smith prosecutions, the special prosecutor regarding the Mar-a-Lago documents, is a little different. The rest of it, I 100% agree with. When Tish James runs on the platform of I'm going to get Trump, that's her political platform. So vote for me so I can get Trump. That's Joseph Stalin stuff. That's Soviet style stuff. And when you have judges like Arthur Engoron, I'm an attorney. I'm offended that any judge is that incompetent. And there's a reason why lawyers frequently have contempt for the judges that they appear before, because judges in certain respects, and Engoron is a perfect example of this, know less about the law, care less about the law than the lawyers do. They're political hacks who there's technically elections in New York, but let's be real. The borough presidents bring together a bunch of delegates, and then they say, and I know because I sat in one of these once, and they say, this election cycle, we need a woman. This election cycle, we need a gay man. It's not
the borough presidents, really the county chairs.
County chairs who are frequent the borough presidents. But so they decide up front the type of person they want. There's no qualification other than
give me somebody with a limp and green hair.
Exactly. And so Engoron, so you don't run on any particular platform. You're a hack. You've come through the system. Someone owes you a favor, and you get nominated. You become a judge. I mean, that's the state court. Federal's different.
Well, listen. In defense of my colleagues,
there are exceptions.
In defense of a lot of my colleagues, you have some very fine judges.
You do.
Some of whom were elected, but I agree with you. Most of the ones who were elected are very, very weak.
Right.
Most of them. But a lot of the appointed ones are very, very good. But they also have some political hacks who are appointed as well. So it's not a perfect system.
So when you have a combination of a morally corrupt attorney general or morally corrupt prosecutor with a hack who is more interested in looking good on TV or in a picture than doing justice, this is what you end up with. And look, anyone who's ever listened to the show or anyone who's ever seen me on TV or has ever read anything I've written knows I'm not the biggest fan of Donald Trump. But it has to be decided at the ballot box. That's who gets to decide who's going to be president. Not some hack, not some corrupt politician, not someone who's trying to destroy democracy in order to save democracy. That is the danger we have here. Our institutions are being strained to the point of breaking. And if the institutions fail, the country will fail. Tish James is doing no one a favor other than the fact that she wants to run for governor and she wants to put this on her resume.
And by the way, the impact of this prosecution and persecution of Donald Trump under executive law and the ability to destroy somebody who's a wealthy person and a former president of this country. If they can do it to Donald Trump, they can do it to anybody. So it raises the question, if you have a wild prosecutor who goes after people, how do they defend themselves? They can be bankrupted. They can be put in jail. It's awful. Why would anybody want to come to New York or stay in New York and do business here? It's a threat to the viability of the state of New York and the city of New York. And Tish James doesn't seem to understand that. The fact of the matter is you have this fellow from Shark Tank the other night, O'Leary, who came on one of the networks, and he said, this is an attack on America. This is not just a problem for New York City and New York State. This is a problem for America. You're showing that you're punishing entrepreneurs on a statute that's on its face and its application defective constitutionally because you're finding somebody guilty of a fraud when there's no injury.
There's a reason why New York State leads the country in outmigration. This is part and parcel of it. And this goes back to the point we were discussing before about a single-party government. New York State is a single-party state.
Controlled by the left wing of the Democratic Party.
Exactly. New York State is. You have a governor. You have a very weak and liberal governor. You have two progressives in the state legislature and in the state Senate. You have communists literally running the New York State City Council, and you have a
city council, right?
And you have a completely ineffectual mayor who says some of the right things, who just doesn't have the juice to be able to get anything done. There is no prayer for New York State if it remains a single-party state.
And a single-party state with all the state offices controlled, and a attorney general who uses a defective, unconstitutional statute to go after a political enemy. She gets Trump, as Professor Dershowitz would say, get Trump. If she gets Trump, it's a message to everybody else. Why would you, in your right mind, invest in the city and the state of New York?
And let's not let Alvin Bragg off the hook here. Alvin Bragg is every bit as bad, every bit as evil. This is evil as Letitia James.
Another phony case, which we'll discuss another time on Let the Record Show. Eric, I want to thank you for being in the studio with me today. This has been Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. God bless you and God bless America.
Let the Record Show is on the air.